All right, so there's been a huge amount of drama, obviously, between Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris over the past, you know, definitely this weekend, but over the whole season as a whole. And a lot of the takes have already been said. I feel, there was a great thing by Will Buxton about just how McLaren are bottling this championship, and a lot of the sense that a lot of people have is that there's this kind of fight between who's the number one driver, right? And we've seen this happen a lot of times in Formula One. Lewis Hamilton, Nico Rosberg, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso. Senna and Prost is obviously the most famous example of this. But I actually don't think that is the dynamic that we're seeing right now. I think we're actually seeing a more similar dynamic to what we saw with Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen back in 2016, 17, and 18. So let me explain why I kind of think that. So just to kind of give a refresher, if you look at Red Bull Racing, their history, they obviously had Vettel and Weber in 2000 and 2009, 2010, 2011, 12, 13. And basically, Mark Webber, had been racing with Coulthard, and then Vettel comes in, and Vettel starts immediately winning championships, and then then Webber leaves, and Daniel Ricciardo is Vettel's new number two, and then Vettel leaves to Ferrari, and now Daniel Ricciardo is the number one at Red Bull, right? And so they pair him with Danny Kvyat, and they're basically expecting like Red Bull is basically in this position where they're like, hey, Daniel Ricciardo, it's now your team, right? So this was 2015, right? This is your team. Go win this. And Daniel Ricciardo was just never really that guy. Daniel Ricciardo was just never really able to win the World Drivers' Championship for Red Bull. They gave him 2-3 seasons as the number one guy, and he just wasn't able to bring them to the promised land, right? And then they had Max Verstappen come along. Max Verstappen was able to bring them to the promised land, and they saw that very, very early on in Max Verstappen's career, and they were like, "Look, Danny, we gave you the keys to the kingdom. You're 20. I think he was 29 years old in 2018. You've been racing for Red Bull for 5 years. You haven't really done what you needed to do. We're going to put our money behind that Max Verstappen, right?" And that's when the whole, then I think at the time they gave Max Verstappen like one of the biggest contracts in history. And Daniel Ricciardo had this real feeling of like, hey, they're making it very clear that Max is their number one guy, that I'm not their number one guy anymore. So I'm going to go to a team where I feel more appreciated, like Renault. And then we had the whole Daniel Ricciardo spiral from there. Here's why I kind of think that's what's going on right now with Lando Norris, is that like if you look at Lando Norris's career, right? So let's go back to 2021, or even we can go back to 2020 when there was Lando Norris, and I think he was teammates with Carlos Sainz at the time, right? And so it was like, hey, Lando's this new up and coming guy. We have Carlos Sainz. Was he? I really should remember this. 2020 Formula One season. Yeah, Sainz was still in McLaren at the time, and they're like, hey, Lando's up and coming, but we have Carlos as well, and then Carlos left to Ferrari, and they brought in Daniel Ricciardo basically to like train and mentor Lando Norris and bring him up there. And Lando Norris did a really good job against Daniel Ricciardo, right? So they were like, okay, Lando Norris is kind of our number one guy right now, but then we've had 5 years and Lando Norris just hasn't been able to win a single race, right? And that's really critical because, like, look, if you can't win the championship, that's one thing, but, like, Pierre Gasly has won a race before Lando Norris, right? Esteban Ocon has won a race before Lando Norris. Like, if you look at the list of ride drivers who won a race in their career before Lando Norris, it's actually, like, kind of a crazy list. Right? Like, this is not a list of people where if you are the championship contender, if you are the next, Lewis Hamilton passed the baton or had the baton taken from him by Max Verstappen. If you're the guy who gets the baton now from Max Verstappen, going 6 years without winning a race, you're not that guy, right? And um, I think that Zach Brown like knows that. I think Zach Brown, look, Zach Brown has been with Lando Norris now for about 15 years, right? He was working with him when he was karting. These two have a really long relationship, which one means a lot of loyalty between the two, but also means that Zach Brown really knows Lando Norris's character, and I think that Zach Brown sees in Lando Norris that you're just not that guy. So they brought in Oscar Piastri last year. The bring and Oscar Piastri was just off the charts for a rookie, right? And then Oscar Piastri this year has won a race and is consistently, on par with and sometimes beating Lando Norris in the same car, right? And so Zach Brown, I think, is looking at the two of them. It's just like, look, we've given, we've given Lando Norris every single chance to be the number one driver, to be that guy, and he's clearly not suitable for it, which is fine, right? Like there are 20 drivers on the grid. You can be, a Valtteri Bottas. You can, be a George Russell or something like that, right? But like if you want to win, there's one or two people on the grid who are able to do that, and I think it's become clear to Zach Brown that Lando Norris is just clearly not that guy, and that's the reason why. And I think that was cemented yesterday. And one thing that Will Buxton was talking about, that didn't make sense to him was like, Oscar probably has something in his contract that, they're both number one drivers, that he's not the number two driver, and that was put there by Mark Webber, his manager. That's all well and good, but like the thing that doesn't make sense is like, look, second to third is not a big drop, but it's a huge difference in terms of points, right? Lando Norris has given up freely 10 points to Max Verstappen in the Drivers' Championship when this championship is probably going to be decided by less than 10 points, right? So if Lando Norris loses, he's probably going to lose by less than 10 points, and he can clearly point a finger at McLaren for them causing that to happen, right? And why is McLaren giving up the World Drivers' Championship? Because for them, I think they clearly have decided that Oscar Piastri is more important to them for the long-term project of McLaren than Lando Norris is. They don't think that Lando Norris is that guy, and they want to invest in Oscar Piastri for the long haul. And like the reason why this is I think this is going to become so clear to everybody in retrospect, because this is such an easy decision to tell Oscar Piastri to swap places with Lando, that for them not to do it, it's clear like they're probably going to lose the World Drivers' Championship this year because of these decisions. And the fact that they're willing to give up one World Drivers' Championship means that they think they're going to be able to win 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 World Drivers' Championships with Oscar Piastri. And they're afraid that if they, piss off Oscar Piastri, then he can go to another team, and they're going to be stuck with Lando Norris, who, unless he has the absolute fastest car on the grid, isn't able to win, and is still unable to win a lot of races, even when he does have the fastest car on the grid. So that's my take. They think that Lando Norris is Daniel Ricciardo. They think that Oscar Piastri is Max Verstappen, and they're putting their cards in Max Verstappen, and they're hoping, and they're like, hey, if we lose this year, we lose, that's fine, we're still going to win the Constructors, but we're going to come back next year with the best car and with a driver who knows that we have his back and is going to go out and win the championship. That being said, if you remember, when Red Bull made that very clear to Daniel Ricciardo left. Is Oscar Piastri going to leave McLaren? I actually think so. The problem is he doesn't really have a lot of places to go, right? Like, McLaren, Ferrari have their drivers still up for at least 2-3 more years. Maybe Lewis Hamilton retires in 2 years and Lando Norris can get his spot. Mercedes are locked up for the next 5-10 years, although who knows, you could have a similar type of driver fight between George and Kimi that you're seeing between Lando and Oscar right now. And Red Bull is turning into a shitbox of who wants to go there. Maybe Lando Norris can go to Aston Martin. Like, that actually kind of makes the most sense out of all of his decisions. And, you just have Fernando retire and Lando Norris go to Aston Martin with Adrian Newey. That's kind of his best case scenario, but all in all, I don't think it's looking good for Lando. And, I'm not sure he wins another race, guys. At least after this year, I don't think he's going to stay at McLaren.